Hello and welcome to Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. Irving is entering the final stages of work on a new comprehensive plan. It's called Imagine Irving, and it could help guide leaders for decades to come. On this program, we're going to talk about the progress and look ahead to the next steps. Our guest star, John Fregonese. He is the president of Fregonese and Associates. Kevin Cass is the City of Irving's redevelopment administrator. And I want to thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Well, let's get right to it. There's a lot to talk about today. And John, I know what we've been talking about for a long time now has just hit a major milestone.
Right.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's the comprehensive plan draft. So I want to make sure people know it's a draft. It's open to change. But it's the first time since the late 90s that there's been a new comprehensive plan put together for the city of Irving. And when we say comprehensive, we mean comprehensive. There's 17 chapters. It covers the usual stuff that you find in a plan, land use and zoning and transportation. It goes into parks, it goes into fiscal health, infrastructure, sustainability. There's a lot of elements that it covers. So it's a lot to look at. I think it's a fairly easy read because each chapter is designed to be, 10, 20 minutes to get through it, and then you understand what's going on. It lays out the policies. So I encourage people to go to imagineirving.org and take a look at it. You can download it. There's copies available at the library, and people should go and take a look and tell us what they think.
So I know some people have already done that or at least started
Yes.
doing that. And so what's the initial response been to the draft?
Well, the recent meetings that we've had, people seem pretty excited about it, and actually in the meetings, there's quite a lot of discussion. Basically, I think people see the benefit of Irving, the fact that it's a very dynamic community, has a lot of options, and people obviously have things about the town that they want to improve. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of people talk about better ways to get around on bike and transit, which is important not just for health, but basically for younger people that are trying to get to school. They don't have their first car. They need to be able to get around. Those are things that we've been looking at. So a number of things like that. Parks is a big issue to make sure that Irving has a great park system to go along with it. Housing and the kind of housing we have, where we have it. Those are all topics that people seem to like to discuss.
Wonderful. Before we talk more about the ideas, I want to talk to you, Kevin, about something else, about going back a bit. Why did the city even want a new comprehensive plan?
It's very important as cities grow and develop and redevelop, which is the stage we're currently in, that you take a step back and kind of look and see where you've been, but more importantly, what do you need to put in place to continue to provide services for your residents and anticipate where growth may occur in the city so you can have options for making available all types of land uses. And as John mentioned before, not only just land use, but so important with land use comes your transportation and your parks and other amenities that the community is looking for to make a very vibrant, wonderful city to live in.
Wonderful. And so, John, let me ask you, what is your role in all of this?
I'm kind of like, I think, a conductor of the orchestra.
Okay.
There's a lot of people that have come together, both consultants, city staff, the public, our advisory committee that's been awesome. We have a 20-person advisory committee that went through each of the drafts. So we do the studies, we do the research. We have our other consultants that do that. For example, we have transportation experts, engineers, economists. And we bring it together and then assemble that into the plan. And then, of course, we're also in charge of organizing the public involvement process. So we'll be out at the Irving Mall on Saturday. We're going to be going to various events around the community to discuss the plan with people.
Wonderful. And Kevin, he mentioned the city's involvement. What exactly have y'all done? How are you involved?
Well, in respect to coordinating the overall delivery of the services, we work daily with Fregonese, both over the phone as well as online, to communicate the different ideas and things we need to talk about and to plan for. So it's a very complex process to do one of these type of projects. We're very fortunate, very blessed to have a group like Fregonese on board because they have the experience across the country of how to pull these plans together and really make them effective for the communities that they're involved in.
Wonderful. So, John, I know that there are several sections, as you mentioned, several
Right.
chapters, as you say. One focuses on stable neighborhoods and home ownership. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yes, Irving is about 60% multifamily. And that's not bad, but a lot of communities want to make sure people that want to own a home have an option to own a home. And there's also much of Irving's neighborhoods have already been developed. So the stable neighborhoods is an effort to really set up policies that recognize neighborhoods that are probably not going to change, and the city's policies need to make sure those remain stable and continue to attract investment. So something that could be destabilizing is, for example, if there's a vacant piece of property, you go in and put in some kind of fast food joint or something, it destabilizes things around it. You don't want to do that in those neighborhoods. So we identify stable neighborhoods. On the other hand, we identify areas that are targeted to redevelopment. Like Heritage Crossing, you want to have good plans for it, and you want to be able, that's a place where you do want to encourage new uses and recycling of existing uses, repurposing existing buildings to new uses.
Wonderful, and I'm glad you mentioned Heritage Crossing,
Right.
because Kevin, I know that you are really involved with Heritage Crossing and that there's actually some new homes getting underway there. Can you share the news?
Yes, ma'am. Recently, we've had the groundbreaking for the 40 new homes, phase 1 of Delaware at Heritage Creek. It's a project that is being developed in conjunction with the Hines Corporation, as well as with K. Havanian Homes, who will be the actual home builder. What's so important about this is the first influx of new quality homes to this scale, so close to the downtown area, so close to the park, so close to future downtown restaurants, entertainment, and above all, the TRE terrain. So the location of this, as well as future phases, there's 4 total, could accumulate up to 100 new homes.
Wow.
right along Delaware Creek. So it's a wonderful opportunity once again for the city to reach out through these type of developments with developers to provide new housing options, as John had mentioned.
Wonderful.
And if I could follow on the
Sure.
new housing options, one of the things that was very typical of development in north central Texas from the 70s, from the 50s really, through almost to 2000 was the quarter-acre lot, the 8,000 square foot lot with the single-family home on it. And that continues to happen at the edge. But more and more, you find the market has shifted towards people want to own a home. They don't necessarily want to own a big lot. And some people really value being near the center of a region as opposed to being at the edge. So there's people that will go out and drive an hour to work so they can have a big lot. But if you really want to live in the core, those big lots, you either buy a home that's already existing. New houses is hard to find with a big lot. You look at Irving, and the days of the big vacant parcels that you can subdivide are over. So really we're looking at the market for ownership housing to be things like smaller lots, the Heritage Crossing piece, townhouses, brownstones, things that you found maybe in a more urban environment as a home ownership, and now it's coming to north central Texas, and again, very popular in Irving. I know that in the PUD number 6, the new area around the old Texas Stadium, the University of Dallas has a developer that's just filed, and they have a nice single-family home development, but the average lot is only 44 by 100. So it's a fairly small, but there's a big house on it, and that's just an option. I mean, I think it's one of the things to continue to encourage home ownership in Irving. Irving has to adapt to this new kind of market and to where it is in its history. And so it's great to have examples like that coming up, quality stuff, and something that gives people what they want.
I see. Now you mentioned there talking about to and from the house, having
Right.
to drive there. So let's talk about transportation, because that's very important. I know there are a number of transportation ideas that are talked about in the
Right.
plan. So can you tell us about, in particular, connections between modes? What do you mean by that?
Well, Irving is obviously, the automobile is king, and so you have to make sure the roads work for cars. And there's a whole set of plans in there for thoroughfares and arterials. And that's actually been done fairly well through the past. And so we continue that, and that's kind of the foundation. But we're looking to improve a number of things. First of all, in places that are called urban centers like Heritage Crossing, the ability to park your car and walk around comfortably instead of having to drive from point to point. to get out and walk around, the ability to walk to a park in your neighborhood instead of having to drive to a park. So more pedestrian activity. We don't think people are going to take 10-mile hikes, but certainly the 5 and 10-minute walk should get you in many places to lots of different destinations. The second thing is really to make Irving more bike friendly. And there's a couple of things. One is to put bike paths or traffic separated bike paths on the busy corridors. That's fairly expensive. And I think there's plans to do that, but the low-hanging fruit is to provide bike routes through the community more in the neighborhoods. Because a lot of people, and I'm a biker myself, I like to ride bikes in cities. I don't like to be on the busiest street in town.
Right.
I like to be on a nice quiet street. And so we have a plan in there for various bike thoroughfares and routes that are off the major roads and through the quiet neighborhood streets, but still get you to places. And it's a matter of signage and striping and so forth. And finally, Irving has great transit in terms of the TRA, the Orange Line, DART, that gets you to and from major locations, the centers of town. Getting around inside Irving in transit is not so easy. And so really working with DART to improve the local bus service so people can get back and forth more efficiently. Just as an example, MacArthur Boulevard has got about 20 education institutions there, from North Lake Community College to high schools. And I think there's no bus service that links, for example, North Lake's 2 campuses. So working with DART to improve that to where you have frequent bus service means that kids can either ride their bike or take the bus when they're in high school, be able to go to the campus, get advanced, placement stuff so that they get a head start on their career.
Wonderful.
Those are all things that we're looking at.
When you talk about careers and getting a head start, you
Right.
think about money, and the kids, of course, they're thinking about malls, and economic development's always very
Right.
important for the city. And something that always comes up in discussion is Irving Mall.
Right.
So what's in the plan about that?
Well, we're actually working with the mall owners to kind of figure out ways to revitalize it. It's been identified as one of the 5 urban centers in the plan. And to really look at it, repurposing that mall. If you look 20 years down the road, most malls are going to change the way they are. And they're doing it by becoming less mall-like and a little bit more Main Street-like. So there's indoor and outdoor shopping. There's like the functional equivalent of streets. There's housing that comes into those areas, and this becomes more of a lifestyle center. And so we're working with them. We're actually going to meet. We're meeting internally. We're meeting with the mall owners to come up with plans that they find acceptable to do that. But there's a lot of good ideas that are going to be in the plan there.
Wonderful. Well, before we talk about the other ideas in the plan, let's talk about where they came from. So, Kevin, I understand that there was a lot of input that was received from residents. Why was it so important for the city to get everyone involved?
It just goes back to the fundamental that any community belongs to the people, it's of the people, and it's all about what a community envisions itself to be. What do you want for your children? What do you want in terms of housing, living, transportation opportunities, educational opportunities? Those things are so important in everything that you do. So that's kind of a nutshell of how we approach that.
I see. And so, John, how did the public input really help shape the plan?
Well, from the very beginning, we had workshops that we invited people to come with maps and stickers and kind of lay out a plan. And we went through, we had, I think, about 20 different maps from the public. So we had lots of people involved in doing that. We digitized those in a computer, we put them together, and that became the Imagine Irving scenario. We actually started with that as a way to see where people would want growth, where they wanted stability, the kind of transportation systems they wanted. So we used that as a foundation for the plan, and then that went on into figuring out which part of it were feasible and how to actually make that viable. And that was the foundation of the plan, and a lot of the themes that came out of this came from that. The other thing was the advisory committee. We spent basically 4 or 5 months drafting the plan. They'd read the whole thing. I've had a lot of committees. I've never had them so determined to do their homework and actually come and have written, and so they went through it and marked it up and had extensive discussions on what policies Irving should be following and kind of what the vision should be for the city.
Very interesting. And I know one thing you're looking at is really focusing on centers
Yes.
in the city. And one is the former stadium site.
Right.
Tell us about it.
Well, the former stadium site there's an 80-acre site in the core where the stadium used to sit. But actually, the plan for that area, and we don't really have a name for it yet. We're waiting for things to get going for the branding of it. But it's 1,000 acres, and it goes right up to the edge of the University of Dallas. It includes an old truck stop. It goes right to the edge of the Trinity River and the Campion Trail. And the idea there is to have an integrated urban center where people can move around in that center, and it's going to be fairly concentrated. I think we're looking at about 30,000 new employees, 20,000 new residences in that 1,000 acres, so pretty urban. And the problem is, as you know, it's crisscrossed by freeways. So getting from one to the other would be difficult without the right kind of transportation system. So part of this was to lay out the land uses and lay out the city's expectations for what's going to happen there. They want to make sure they get in good quality development of basically more of an urban style instead of just a lot of apartments or something.
I see.
And then developing the road system around it and make sure that people can get from one spot to the other. It's not just a bunch of islands, it's well interconnected. And there's going to be a signature bridge that's been in the plans. So when you're driving along, you'll see this beautiful bridge that will give you a landmark there.
Wonderful. And so that's part of the center. Then you mentioned it goes to different locations because another one is the Las Colinas Urban Center.
Right.
Tell us about that one.
Well, that's one that is one of the big signatures in Irving. I think dates back to the 70s, the first ideas there. Very successful. Probably the economist that was working on this plan said it's the most branded non-city urban center, in North Central Texas.
Wow.
Las Colinas is known not only around North Central Texas, the whole state, and nationally because it's a center of corporate headquarters. So what's happened over time as that area has grown, it's evolved in certain ways. It has that little transit system that goes around. Now it's got the orange line that hooks in, kind of integrating those things together better. And over time, the development style has changed from just wanting office to wanting mixed use.
Yeah.
So people find that to attract workers nowadays, they want to be able to live nearby. Even if they don't live nearby, it's kind of nice having a residential area because the restaurants and everything's more interesting because people are hanging out longer. People in these offices don't work 9 to 5. They work late. Sometimes they're on a project. So it's nice to be able to go and have a place that's open and active more than 9 to 5. And so you see the developments in the planning there is coming to be orient to the transit, be more mixed use, be more vibrant, be more than just an office center.
So what's another area that needs special attention?
Well, Heritage Crossing is one of the premier ones. That's one of the 5. And we've talked, and you might mention, what the plans are coming up for that with the Irving Boulevard redevelopment. I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah. One of the key things for redevelopment, it's not just your land use, it's your transportation, as we already spoke about, and putting those amenities in that people really enjoy. So one of the things the city is looking at, of course, is the reconstruction of Irving Boulevard and 2nd Street through the downtown area. That all ties in with Centennial Park, everything to do with downtowns. What we really find key about that is that'll set a stage for having new development come in once that roadway is placed. And once again, it'll provide amenities that are currently lacking down there in terms of parking and other, physical attractions for people.
Okay, and I understand also, I'll switch back to you, John, real quick.
Sure.
I understand there's an idea for an area near the airport.
Yes, it's called MacArthur Crossing. It's north of Northgate, up by on the north part of the community. And it's basically the newest part of the city that's been developed since the 90s and on. And really it's one of the more prosperous part of the cities, but the commercial areas are more or less just, shopping centers and stuff, and try to pull that together and make a center out of that. One of the key parts of that is Northgate Community College and integrating that into that area around them, and they are doing a campus plan. As part of their plan, they're going to try to integrate better with the DART station there, and right now there's a big parking lot in between. I think they're going to kind of grow towards that. and also to bring some other mixed uses around the edge, some housing, some commercial development that is more walkable to try to stimulate that area. So that's one of the ideas that have come out of Northgate.
Very interesting. So Kevin, we're hearing a lot of ideas. What's it going to take to make them reality?
Implementation is the key. Plans, although they are complex to put together, one of the most difficult things to do and what city leaders have to engage in is implementation strategy. What the plan provides us with is the long-term vision. What city leaders will do is take the elements from the plan that are prioritized as they see fit and put those in the 3 to 5 year strategic plan for setting forth budget priorities as we go from year to year. And so implementation is the key, and that's how you get these plans to bring them to fruition.
Wonderful.
And there is, for citizens that want to join in on that, if they go to imagineirving.org, there is a survey on implementation.
Okay.
So we've brought up the top 8 ideas, and people can go in there and tell us how much they like each one, and then which of those ideas are their first and second choice. And those will be used to put in the final chapter of the plan, which is the strategic implementation.
So I was going to ask you, what is the next step in the process for you?
Well, the next step is to review this plan with the public.
Okay.
And then, as I mentioned, put together the strategic implementation plan, and then take that in June to start hearings at the Planning Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then on to Council for adoption. So we're at the beginning of the end, I would say, where we've got a complete draft out there. People can review it, they can tell us what they think, it'll be modified as it goes along, and then brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council for adoption.
Wonderful. Well, we do have a few more minutes left, so I want to go through a few themes that were brought up in the comprehensive planning process, and if you can elaborate on them, that'd be great. Let's start first with parks and open space.
Great. I'm glad you asked that. That's probably the longest chapter. The Parks Department really wanted to set up a change in basically a renewal of the Parks Master Plan. So really it's looking at where do people live, how many people can walk to a park, how many people can get to a park otherwise, what are the services this park provides, where are areas of park shortage where we need to invest in new parks, where are areas that are going to have growth where we need to make sure that those have access to parks, and then figuring out a plan to supply all that. One of the keys is really to set this up for a new Parks Master Plan, which the city needs in order to get financial help from the state and federal government to help implement a parks plan. And I think that's one of the keys. Another one is to finish the Campion Trail, the trail that goes along the Trinity River. There's gaps and ownership issues to keep it from being a continuous trail. That's going to be a great asset. And again, when you look at where a lot of the new development is going, it's right on the edge of the Trinity right now, and that would be a great amenity to be in this fairly urban center, but be right out your door. You have this great open space that goes all the way through the north central Texas area.
Wonderful. And next, can you talk a bit on mass transit?
Yeah, mass transit was basically, Irving has some of I think the best mass transit outside of the city of Dallas in the north central Texas area. It has a light rail line with many stops, the Orange Line, and it has the TRE that has the stop in downtown. So that's great. And I think that one of the issues is, while it has bus lines that go through Irving, they're not as well focused to the new plan. And ideally, you would have bus or other kinds of transit that circulate between all the centers and be able to get you around. We mentioned MacArthur Corridor, O'Connor's another one. There's connecting basically the TRE in downtown to the Orange Line. There's a lot of things like that to make life practical as a transit user. So you don't want people to be having a huge deficit in travel time if they take the bus. It should be, usually it's a little bit longer, but maybe 10 or 20 minutes, 10 minutes longer, not an hour longer, and you have to do all these transfers. Okay,
now what about green initiatives?
Well, green initiatives is part of the plan as well, and really a lot of that involves how we treat stormwater. I think one of the issues in the past has been when you get stormwater, you put it in a pipe and you get it in a creek as soon as you can. And I think the new approach is to let that settle in, basically to put it in a greener area, in an area that has some plants, so the sediments settle out, the poisons come out, and the water that goes into the creeks is much higher quality. And it gives you also an amenity in terms of the landscaping that does that.
A lot of good stuff happening, a lot of great ideas. And Kevin, after hearing all those ideas and all those plans, what's your response?
We're very excited, not only as a staff but also as a city, to be able to undertake this plan. The response that we've had from the citizens, both at the meetings as well as online, has been fantastic, and I do want to thank the residents for all their contribution. As you also mentioned, our Citizens Advisory Committee for all the hard work that they've put in. This plan will definitely represent what the public, what the citizens, residents of Irving are really seeking after.
Wonderful. And speaking of the residents and the people in the city of Irving, John, earlier in the process, you looked closely at the city's demographics.
Yes.
So what did that reveal to you?
Well, it's interesting. If you look especially back in Irving from 1980, Irving was a very homogeneous ethnic city. It's very diverse now. It has, I don't think the largest ethnic group is 30%. It's Hispanic, it's white, it's Asian, it has it's African American, it has a whole range, and it looks very much like what Texas looks like in the future. It's the prototypical Texas city. And the other thing is, it has about the same average income as Texas, as the United States, about $50,000, much higher than Dallas, by the way, which is down to 42. So it's fairly prosperous, but very young. So the average age in Irving is 32, Texas is 34, the United States is 37. So you've got a young, fairly prosperous, really dynamic population here, and I think that's a really important thing. The Gen Xers and the millennials are the ones that are going to be running the city in a few years and are running it now, and that's by far the largest population in Irving.
Wow, we have one last question for you, and that's at the plan's recent unveiling. What were some of the questions you heard?
We heard a lot of questions on the housing issue and on how to bring new residents into the downtown area, for example, or the kind of housing people wanted. Stability in neighborhoods is constantly an issue, and we heard about that. We heard a lot about biking and transit and various ideas from people on how to get around with that, and I think probably one of the larger issues was parks. People are really worried about having enough parks, improving the park system, making sure the parks are good. So I think that's going to get a lot of attention.
Wonderful. And you gave out the email just a minute ago, or the website. And where can people go and get involved?
ImagineIrving.org. And if you just Google Imagine Irving, it'll pop right up. And just go there. It's a great website. There's a lot of interesting stuff on it. It's updated constantly. There's a survey on implementation you can take. You can download copies of the plan and the various presentations that have been given. So a lot of information there. Fun place to spend a few minutes finding out about your city.
Wonderful. You touched a bit on the comments and feedback you've been receiving. What about you, Kevin, on the city side? What kind of comments have you received from people?
It pretty much follows what John has already mentioned. Transportation is always a key issue. Housing, being able to provide, as John mentioned before in the demographics, we're currently a city of about 231,000 and we're projected to go up to 318,000. So when we look at our housing options, you have to be pretty smart in how we lay those out, how we plan for those type of items. But in general, we're just, as I said before, we're just very excited at this opportunity because this provides the framework that we're looking for that'll provide us with ideas and initiatives to go forward and make sure that we are making the best use of everything we have here in Irving. We have tremendous amenities to work with here.
Wonderful. And with that, we'll come to a close. I want to thank you both for taking time to talk with us about what's going on right here in the city of Irving. And thank you for watching. I'm Starlene Stringer. Please be sure to join us live on Thursday, May 5th at 1:30 p.m. for our next edition of Open Line. We'll be talking about the West Nile virus. Our guests from the city of Irving and Dallas County will discuss mosquito control and health concerns too. If you have questions, please email them to ictn@cityofirving.org, and we'll get answers for you on our next edition of Open Line. We'll see you then.